Hello to everyone. So thank you so much for coming here. I know how hard it could be after a long day of work to be here. And it's also fantastic to see so many friendly faces. For who doesn't know me, my name is Viviana Novelli, and I work for Prepare in the University of Bristol. Prepare is a project that is funded by the GCRF. For who doesn't know, GCRF is a British fund that actually address the challenges that are faced in developing countries. Prepare aim at enhancing preparedness for East African countries through seismic resilience engineering. And thanks to EEFIT, thanks to this grant, actually they have supported me to investigating something more specific. And thanks to this grant, actually, I'm looking more in details to some low-cost engineering solutions for East African countries. I don't know, so through this presentation, what I'm going to do is actually to bring you to my African experience, if I can say that. So we will look together which are the challenges and how actually I went through to solve these challenges. I don't know how much you know about Africa. When we talk about Africa overall, there is poverty. If you are born in Africa, you are in the poverty. There is a very low incoming class, and then there are rich people. But most of the people in Africa, they belong actually to the poverty level. So there is actually this very little perception about the fact that there is no hope of enhancing people from their poverty. So there is no actually real long-term solution. But this is not actually what I think, and it's not actually what the people think that are working for developing countries. And also, it's actually not the fault of EEFIT, because actually has funded me on this research. And I can say that, and I really believe that light can be bring in these countries, because I've been working in Africa for a few years, and I had the opportunity to meet African people. African people are positive. They are actually this attitude of do things in the right way. And they try actually they are curious, so they want to know more. So actually for us, working for this type of projects, we have the opportunity to bring actually, to increase the awareness in this country. How? Actually we can do that by make them to understand which are actually the difficulties that they have when actually another impact on a very vulnerable country as it is actually the different countries in Africa. So the point is that when we talk in particular about East African countries, they are actually subjected to different types of environmental disturbances, such as storms, heat waves, landslides. But most importantly, East African countries are also seismic prone areas. And this is due to the fact that there is a rift that is highlighted in that slide in red that actually makes that earthquakes of magnitude 7 or even greater can actually occur in the major geological faults. So in order, we don't know actually, we cannot prevent how earthquakes occur, but we can prevent that an earthquake become a disaster. And the question is, how can we prevent that an earthquake become a disaster in East African countries? In order to go through that, we need a strategy that is outlined in this slide in 6 different steps. What I'm going to do with this presentation is actually go through each of these steps together by talking about Malawi. Malawi is, here you can see actually are highlighted 2 major earthquakes that occur in this country. One was dated in 1989, another one in 2009. Both earthquakes caused thousands of householders and then thousands of damaged and collapsed buildings. So the question at this point is, how are the buildings in Malawi? Generally, to answer to this question, what we do is actually to look at the codes and the guidelines. When we talk about Malawi, officially, there is a design code for masonry structures. The design code is based on British standards. So you can already imagine, you don't need me actually to make you understand that actually these codes are difficult to be applied in a country as Malawi. After the last earthquake that was in 2009, there was guidelines were introduced. Guidelines in order to make safer houses. But again, there is a big gap between what codes and guidelines says and what actually happened in the country. Local communities do not always opt for the solution indicated in codes and guidelines because they are not usually affordable. So, in order to understand actually how the works, how buildings are in the countries, we actually did an extensive on-site survey. And as you can see for this video, we did that with the help from students, from professionals, local professionals. So we trained them in order to do on-site surveys. And it was a fantastic experience for them because they have the opportunity to look to the buildings, to their buildings, in a completely different way, from a structural point of view. And it was a great experience for us because thanks to them, we could actually speak with the locals and understand better, actually, how they are the construction and which are the practices in use in Malawi. According to the data collected on site, we actually classified the buildings according to the material quality. It wasn't a parameter that we needed to introduce because actually all the houses are made of bricks, but bricks can be very different because they are locally produced. So there is no quality control. And this means that actually bricks can be very different in colors, in size. You can see also actually sometimes stones in a brick. So we had the need to actually classify whether these bricks have good or low quality. We also identify which are the buildings that have lintels. Very few of them that have like concrete lintels or concrete ring beams. Most of them, actually, they don't have at all any type of lintels, as you can see from that picture. So there is just the frame of the window, and that's it. And then we also try to collect data in a way that we can also record whether there were any type of irregularities on the buildings, like porticos. And then we classify the quality of the connection between walls, and then also identify the different typology of roofs. The most typical roofs there are corrugated metal roofing sheets, or the second one, that are tranche roof. Most of the buildings have gables, but as you can see from the pictures, gables are not connected to the roof. So we have a very light roofs that are not connected to the structures. According to the data that we collect on site, we classify the buildings in 3 main categories, A, B, and C. As you can see, actually, it's a bit different classification to the ones that we usually found on available, like the worldwide database. We actually introduced a new parameter that is the quality. When I talk about quality, I'm talking about the quality of the materials, quality of the construction practice, quality of how walls are connected to each other. So using these parameters, we identify 3 classes. The main class is actually medium quality. So most of the buildings belong to this class, medium. And these are buildings made of 5 bricks with a mud mortar, single double skin. Then we have low quality. And in this case, we are talking about houses made of unfired of 5 bricks with mud mortar, and they are single skin. And then we have high quality, that are buildings made of 5 bricks with cement mortar and concrete lintels. Again, single double skin. Of course, when I talk about high quality, this high quality is also defined according to the quality that we observed on site. After we have identified the geometry, the structural condition of the houses, we then actually went to find a way to characterize the mechanical properties. As I told you at the beginning, bricks are locally produced in kilns. So how you drive actually along the country, you can see many kilns. And the problem of the kilns is that it's very difficult to keep the temperature, constant temperature. So what will happen is actually what you can see in the last 2 pictures. You have these bricks that are very dishomogeneous, and they have presence of stones in different colors. The fact that there is a different colors, it depends on the fact that the temperature in the bricks is not constant, so they are not actually cooked in always the same temperature. And then another problem is about the size. So bricks can have different size. So you can see here, actually, there are some very big. It's not just the perspective of the pictures, but I can assure you that are bigger than the others. So there is an issue that we need to characterize the materials. In order to do that, we actually carried out an extensive testing. And this was carried out at the Polytechnic of Malawi. There was bricklayer helping us to do the basement. We did different type of testing to characterize bricks and the mortar. We did a tension test. We did also some specific tests in order to even characterize the performance in plane and out of plane of the panels. And the tests were actually, here you can see an example of the testing that we did this year. We test actually panels in different conditions, favorable and unfavorable. That means that the bricks were soaked in the water or are dried. We also actually test different type of mortars, mud and cement mortar, with different actually content cement. Some 1 to 4, that is actually what is recommended by the guidelines, the design codes. 1 to 6 recommended by the guidelines, and 1 to 8 is actually the most common cement ratio that is used in practice. According to these parameters, actually, according to the different tests, then we characterized the mechanical properties of the bricks and considered the different conditions that we actually test, and then we actually correlate what we test here with what we observed on site. So, knowing the geometry, the structural condition, and the material properties, now the question is how we're going to assess the seismic performance of these buildings. So we actually use a limited state analysis based on cinematic models that assume that actually that masonry structure behaves as a rigid body which rotates or slides according to the geometry of the internal structural condition between the roof and walls. The aim of this approach is actually to identify load factor multiplier that identifies the failure mode that has the highest probability of occurrence. But which are the typical failure modes of these structures? In order to answer to this question, we look to some pictures that we had from the past earthquake, 2009, 10 years ago. And we actually observed the typical failure modes that are for masonry structures. The first one, out of plane, that occurs on buildings that have a very poor connection between walls and poor quality of materials, poor bonding. Then we have B, that is actually overturning of the gable. And this is very common considering that we saw that earlier that generally gables are not connected to the entire structure, to the roofs. And then we have strip, that is actually the overturning of piers or spandrels. And then we have the last two failures. One in plane, that of course you know better than me probably, that occur when buildings have good connections. So we have a box behavior of buildings. And then the last one that is actually related to overturning of the corner. Of course, D and E and C actually occur when buildings are better constructed. So using the approach, actually, we try to estimate which is the failure mode distribution for these houses. And as expected, we have that the out-of-plane failures is the most common one for this type of buildings. Then we have gables, and then we have the strips that are the ones that have a higher percentage. And then we have still very few buildings failing for in-plane of corner. This is due to the fact that even they are better constructed, the fact that materials are very poor and the content of cement is very low, they have still a very low performance under earthquakes. So in order to prevent, actually, the most common failure modes that occur for these buildings, the idea is actually to propose a low-cost engineering solutions, but not, because it's very difficult also to introduce for these countries new techniques. We actually rely on a technique that is already in use in practice, that is used in practice. It's the use of buttresses. The point is that in Malawi, buttresses are used, but they are not used to prevent out of plane. They actually are there, but they are used because people spend most of their time outside their houses. So they actually need a private space to spend their time. So you see women and children stay there waiting for their men that probably doesn't work in the village, work in the city or in Mozambique. And so the idea is actually to reuse these same structural elements, but with a specific aim to prevent overturning. And avoid something like this. I mean, and this is what you can see very often in Malawi. Buttresses are there, they are not connected, there is a very poor maintenance of the buildings. In order to, this slide actually show you how the use of buttresses can actually improve the performance of these structures. So we have a reduction of overturning on gable. Auto-plane is completely prevented by using buttresses. And then, of course, we have more houses failing used in these other type of mechanisms. So, but how we can measure the vulnerability? I mean, how can we measure actually the impact of the use of buttresses? And this is done through using fragility curves. So what you will see here is actually a fragility curves that is produced for before and after the retrofitting. So we have actually that no retrofitting, the 50% of buildings will collapse, while after the retrofitting, only the 40%. But in order to understand actually how buttresses works and which is actually the typologies, the class of buildings that are highly affected by the use of buttresses, I also produce fragility curves for quality of construction. So if you look at this, it's very interesting to see that we have 52% of buildings collapsing if they are in class A. And this percentage is reduced in C when actually buildings are constructing with better materials and with the cement. And so actually this percentage is reduced from 52 to 31 if we're using also buttresses. Just to summarize, is actually this work you have seen the efficiency of using buttresses, but actually, please look at the report if you want to see more. There is also other type of low-cost engineering solutions that are proposed for other types of the efficiency identified in the buildings observed on site. This strategy has been applied specifically in this case for Malawi, but this is same approach can be actually extended to a bigger framework to assess the risk. We start here from Malawi, but the same type of approach can be actually extended also to other East African countries. Before ending this presentation, I just would like ending with saying, give you actually a message, because working these countries, I mean, whatever we talk about in this room, all the work that we do for developing country, can become actually important tools to enhance the seismic resilience in these places. And there are tools that actually can work, but only if we do a lot of disseminations. When I talk about dissemination, I'm talking about training, workshop, do also actually use local radio, because our tools, our knowledge needs to be transferred to them. Because these are tools, and these tools, if they are left like in a chest, they will be not make any difference. Before ending, I just would like to tell you also that, I mean, to work in this country is very, very challenging, but it's so challenging as it is so overwhelming. So I really would like you to see, I just prepared for you like a videos that I want you to look at, just to give you a little bit of flavor of what was for me actually to work in Africa, also with the hope that there will be more people actually that will work in these countries.